Please don't hear any of this, Brad.
All right, we ready? You hitting it? Tell me when we're rolling. No, we've been rolling. God damn.
We're Googling over here.
All right.
To nerd sports now, people.
Exactly.
Look out. Do you fear death?
Oh, one of the greatest lines of all time.
I've got a job to it. I've got a job to it.
Kind of like whistles at her, so Dad looks over and the guy's going. And Dad's like, I got the fuck out of there. I was like, oh man, you didn't partake? I thought that was part of the mountain biking community, that y'all just went out there and had sex together in your tight shorts. But
Really making me 30 sides of red sauce. He just takes it back up.
So that's what I was doing wrong the first time.
That's what you were doing wrong.
Big Pharma's turning the frogs gay, and it's coming after your kids.
And they're going to make them incredibly happy.
Infowars.com.
Listened to so much. Are you...
Have you seen The Cage? Or so The Cage was the pilot episode of the original Star Trek series.
Okay, no.
I can't remember the guy's name, but he was Captain Pike. He was Captain of the Enterprise.
Yep.
Spock was not the first officer. He was the science officer, and the first officer was a female.
Okay.
It's Gene Roddenberry's wife, who plays Nurse Chapel.
Okay.
Who's in that show.
Yeah.
They've given her a bigger role, changed hair color, I think. But the executives were like, this guy's not our guy. Let's cast somebody else. Let's get rid of the devil ears on Spock.
Yeah.
Do a few things. So Gene changed most of them. He kept the devil ears, obviously. But they cast Shatner as Kirk.
Okay.
And anyway, I think in season 2, they did a 2-part episode called The Menagerie.
Okay.
Where they basically took the footage of The Cage and spliced it into the new episode as flashbacks,
Okay.
which is really cool.
That is cool.
So I would recommend, if you're a fan of Strange New Worlds, either going back and watching the 2-parter Menagerie,
Yeah.
which is probably cooler because you get in both stories, or the original pilot, The Cage.
That's what I plan to go back to the original series after we finish Strange New World. I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Do you have any experience with it so far?
No. I know nothing about the original Star Trek other than just like pop culture references that you would see everywhere.
Okay. So it's 1960s television.
Right.
This was before the special effects era.
Yes.
But what is funny about it is very diverse.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you've got... Now, not everybody was actually what they were playing. Like,
Right.
Jimmy Doohan that played Scotty was not Scottish.
Yep.
I think he was American. And then the guy that played Chekhov,
Yeah.
Walter Koenig, is not Russian.
Yeah.
That's some good accents going, though.
I'm
Really
excited
good
to dive
accents.
into it.
Well, Max, my oldest one, really loves it.
Okay, cool.
We watched the entire original series, and maybe we started we only started about a year ago.
How old is Max now?
Yeah, he's 14.
14, okay.
But he's a huge fan of the original series, and then we watched the movies.
Yep.
We've started TNG, and we watched the first J.J. Abrams movie.
Okay, cool.
He was not a fan.
How did you feel about the Abrams?
Oh, I hated it.
Okay.
But that movie was not made for me.
Right.
It was made for a
People
group of
who
people who have not
never
watched
seen Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's an introduction to the
It
world.
breaks my brain.
Yeah.
And if you ever watch the original series all the way through, you'll understand why. It may
Yeah.
not bother you as much,
Sure.
but it's just, and I think that's a hard conversation especially if you talk about like progressive versus conservative.
Sure.
Because I don't really believe in political parties. I think there's just like different leanings, but like as a conservative of entertainment,
Yes.
if it's canon, it's canon.
Yeah, of
by
course. You
God.
don't want to touch that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Like if a black character was race swapped to a white character,
Right.
I would be upset.
Sure.
Like, hey, in the book,
Sure, right.
you know.
Yeah, the Cassie's very into all things literary. And one of the things they talked about in something she was reading is like, for somebody to enter your literary world, it has to be consistent with itself.
Yes.
And the minute the world breaks, the entire thing you've entered into goes away.
You're out.
So
it's
that's
like
wh-
the holodeck going off.
It is.
Like you're out of the illusion.
It's why you need consistency in the canon.
Yes.
Because that's what allows people to enter the world and believe it.
What was one of the first canonical things you got into? I remember you were a huge X-Men fan when you were a kid.
Yeah, Marvel Comics was my earliest thing, specifically X-Men.
I remember that well.
I went through like a hard X-Men phase, and then following X-Men was Star Wars.
Okay. So
So
you got
those-
into Star Wars after.
Yeah, I got into Star Wars. I remember I was late elementary school, and on a Thanksgiving week, they would play the Star Wars movies on TV.
Okay.
And I remember like binging them on a Thanksgiving week, probably like 4th grade, and being like, I found my new thing. And so
Yeah.
I went hard into Star Wars for a while.
And that's all we had then was still just
Right.
the 3 movies.
Yep, the 3 movies, and I got them on VHS that Christmas.
Nice.
And so
Now,
yeah,
are those the originals?
they
Or
are.
are they the digital re-release?
So it's before the re-release. So there were 3. I'm about to go nerd here.
Please.
So there was the untouched original.
Mm-hmm.
Then they didn't add new footage, but they just retouched like lightsabers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I have.
Okay.
So it's
But that's-
remastered, but it's before the.
But it's before the digital
The new
ads
CG
and
stuff.
all the CG stuff. in
So I have the
2000.
VHS of the before the CG.
Well, you probably actually have the best version.
It's
because some of that
beautiful.
stuff did need to be cleaned
It
up.
did.
It's kind of like the Star Trek remasters
Yep.
are great.
Yep.
Because all they're really doing is the external ship shots.
Yep.
So it doesn't look like a cardboard ship
Yeah,
in
yeah,
front
yeah.
of some pin-like stars. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
They made it look nice.
Yeah.
Because it did look
Sure.
dated.
Sure.
And, I mean, you can't change the rubber suits.
Right.
You know, but at least when you get those exterior shots, they freshen them up, they tighten them up. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
As
sure.
long as you're not messing with Canon.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, if you get a window in the wrong place, no,
That's a problem. That's a problem.
We got to talk about that. But if you're, you know, classing it up, making it look
Yep.
of age, but then again, like there's just something different about. Well, you talk about Star Wars. They were using practical effects.
Yeah. Sure.
Practical effects look better because even if they don't look as good as CG, I don't even know what the word I'm trying to use is. They're still real. They're
Yeah, sure.
physical. They're tangible.
It's why Chris Nolan movies are so great. Is every time he can shoot something live on set over CG, he always goes for that. So
Yeah.
that like one of my favorite shots is in Batman Begins. There's a train crash that is a model train crashed into a model city. And so he filmed this amazing crash scene that everyone else would have done CGI today.
Yeah.
He filmed it.
He probably could have done it then.
Yeah, he
Maybe.
could have. He totally could have. He
Probably
totally
could've.
could have. But he just said because there's something about. He said you can feel it when you're watching a movie.
You
when,
can?
when you're seeing
Well,
something
a
that's
great
live on the
example
set.
of it is Lord of the Rings versus The Hobbit.
Absolutely.
Same director.
Yep. But orcs in costumes and makeup versus CGI orcs makes all the difference in the
It
world.
makes all the difference. And even if you know it's a suit, it's still a real thing.
Yep.
CG your brain just tells you it's fake.
Sure. Sure. And I've heard that our brains are stronger that way the closer to the thing is to being human. And so the more human in what something's
So a
supposed
guy
to
in
look
a fake
Yeah.
rubber suit is more
is
human
much more human
than a
than a
computer
CGI.
image.
Like if we see a CGI bear, we're going to be more okay with that than we are a CGI human, because we're so wired to know all the intricacies of what a face should do
fascinating.
that we're
yeah.
going to be really bothered by that.
And that's part of why video games can't get it right because you can't get the face.
The face
They can
is
get
like-
everything else.
Yep.
They just can't capture the face yet.
Yet.
You think we'll get there? I assume.
I assume we will. I mean,
We have to.
It seems like the rate we're going. Yeah, I would imagine.
Well, how far is technology coming? 2 years ago, we weren't talking to AI
Right.
on our phones.
Right.
It was unheard of.
It really is, and I'm kind of. I mean, I'm one of those kind of spooked by a lot of that technology.
Same.
I've
That's the
slow to-
conservative in me. It's
Totally.
like,
I'm the
slow
same
it
way.
down.
But I did. I was like, my first practical experiment in AI was we were talking about doing like a survey at our church, a bunch of questions we wanted to ask the congregation. And so we had this like hour-long meeting of everything that we wanted to put into it, and then they were going, "Well," and I just went, "I wonder." And so I pulled up ChatGPT, said, "We're at an evangelical church in the South, and we want to know this from our congregation. Produce a survey," and it was brilliant. I was like,
After y'all had been.
after we'd been talking for an hour, I just entered in like
You
a
just-
2-sentence prompt, and it was better than what we had done
What
in
you'd
an hour.
already done.
And I was like, okay, that's ridiculous and helpful.
That's wild.
Yep.
What kind of stuff was it coming up with?
It was so we were wanting to know about like our worship services, and so it asked a bunch of questions like, do you find it more helpful to pray prayers that are spontaneous or prayers that are pre-written and scripted? And do you find it more helpful
That's a
to?
good question.
It's a great question.
It's a great question.
Do you find it more meaningful to read classic confessions or to sing contemporary praise songs. And so it was going through all, I mean, really
Yeah.
great questions about the worship experience and what people engage in. And I was like, these are all the questions we wanted to ask.
But you see the inherent biases in it. Like,
Sure.
there's a huge trend right now where people are asking the AIs, like, tell me why I should vote for Trump.
Yeah,
It
sure.
says, I can't weigh in on political things. Tell me why I should vote for Harris. Well, Kamala Harris is, and you start saying,
Yeah, sure.
it's like, come on, bro.
I mean-
if I can't trust you on a little thing.
At the end of the day, people still made it. And so
Exactly.
people
so it
made
can
it.
never be perfect.
And
it can be better than us.
It can be better than
But
us.
still imperfect.
And it's going and pulling information from the internet. I mean, its source material is still
It's still fallible.
stuff that we wrote.
Right.
And so
that's true.
It's pulling from that. And so I was reading the other day, this is fascinating. This is the first time this has been true in computers. AI is really bad at math. It's the first computer product that's better at language than it is math. And so they gave all these examples of giving different AI bots math problems and it getting it really wrong on stuff that you should, because they're designed for language.
Is that right?
And
I've
so-
never heard anything about its math. I've
Yeah.
never even heard the topic brought up.
Yeah, so they said
Because
it
you
was-
would just assume
you would assume a computer
it
would be
could
great
do
at math.
anything.
But yeah, it actually was getting math wrong pretty
How
regularly.
recently was this?
This is in the last 6 months probably that I read the article.
God, 6 months is a long.
It's a long
ago.
time in this world. It
In
really
AI
is. Yeah, absolutely.
Language, God, they might have fixed that by now. Who knows? But you can beta test all day long, but
Sure.
until you get it out, it was like practice.
Sure.
You can see all kinds of scenarios in a practice, but unless you get in a game,
Yeah.
or unless war gaming, right?
Right.
You don't know what
Yeah.
they're going to have, a new weapon or a new. There's a reason military secrets are secret.
Absolutely.
And I believe in some clandestine operations
Sure.
to keep national security, but
Yeah.
like, what's your whole? You mentioned earlier, like, you'll go down a rabbit hole now.
Oh, yeah, sure.
What's your thing on the alien?
I mean, my gut. So I will admit it first that I want to believe. So I have a bias toward wanting these
But
things
a
to be
good
true.
scientist
Yes.
has to disprove
Yes.
his own wants.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I have to acknowledge that up front.
Yeah.
But I mean, based on the things that I've heard and read, it seems most likely to me that we've had encounters. That just seems overwhelmingly likely based on the things I've seen. I'm no expert on it, but the reports I've read seem compelling to me.
A lot of them do.
yeah.
A lot of them don't.
Yeah, there's a lot that's
There's
garbage.
a lot of trash. Yeah.
Yep.
It's hard to sift through.
Sure.
So you have to kind of rely on some of the experts out there, and who's
Yeah.
credible, who's not. I mean, you can watch a lot of it for yourself.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot to sift through.
Sure.
So you want to believe it.
I want to believe it. The part of me that I also have a predisposition to be a little bit conspiratorial, so assume things are getting covered up. And so I probably also have a little bit of a distrust.
Okay, I'm that way too.
Mm-hmm.
But not most people are.
No,
In fact, I would argue the vast majority are not that way.
sure.
What do you think made you that way?
That's a great question.
In helping to understand myself.
I think a big part of it probably is this is going to require a lot of self-awareness that I may not have, but I think some of it probably is a love of sci-fi and adventure that kind of wants to believe there's something more going on to the world, that just kind of has a strong instinct toward that. And so I think there's definitely a bias in me toward that for sure. And then I think I also probably have seen enough examples of people not wanting to be honest, to just kind of have a general expectation that sure, people can lie. I don't want to be a cynic, because I do think that I don't want to say there isn't good in the world and that people aren't desiring to do good things. But I think there is a value in not taking things for granted until you have a reliable source.
Absolutely.
Now, the thing that I thought was helpful, I heard somebody talking on conspiracies and what makes something a conspiracy theory versus good research. And they said, and I thought this was a helpful distinction, a conspiracy is something that by definition can't be proved. And so that's the difference between a good or a conspiracy theory might be, this happened and the evidence is destroyed, so we'll never find it. So it's a thesis that can't be proven or disproven. And they said, be skeptical if the deck is stacked such that you can't prove them wrong.
Well, it can be proven when it becomes true. Like,
when it becomes out there.
When it happens, and you can say, see.
And
that's why Alex Jones is skyrocketed.
Yes. So I would say, this when I feel uncomfortable with probably the line at which some of my more conspiracy-oriented friends is when they are reading conspiracy into motives where there's no way you could prove that. So, for example, it's one thing to say, I think this happened, and here's the data to show that it happened. It's another thing to say, this is what I think someone was thinking when they did it. And I tend to be pretty skeptical of the motive guessing thing.
Motive, yeah.
That's
almost impossible.
That's almost impossible. So when somebody tells me this is why someone did that, I go, you don't know. I don't know.
But it's fun.
It is fun. It's so much fun.
It can be fun.
It can be a lot of fun. So I also, now this is while I'm just this is confession hour now. The other part of my personality that's not good, I'm pretty ADHD, and I learned this about ADHD people. When we're bored, we start fights for fun. So I have a tendency to walk in a room, and it doesn't matter which way the room leans. If I'm in a room that's very conservative, I will say something provocatively liberal. And if I'm in a room that's very liberal, I'll say something provocatively conservative, just because I'm kind of obnoxious like that.
Man, that's really funny. I do the same thing.
And
we have some, is that a genetic thing?
Maybe. I think so. It makes sense.
Come from the mother's line. It come from.
Yeah.
That's weird because I am also. It's kind of like whoever you're with, you want to be the antithesis, just to play. Just to play it.
It's probably. I think there's like
more
fun. It's a lot more fun. I'm very annoyed if I'm in a conversation.
You learn a lot more about people.
You learn a lot more about people. If I'm in a conversation where everyone is saying the same thing, that's really boring to me.
I want to leave.
I'm like, this is not.
I don't
cool.
need an echo chamber. This is boring. Yeah.
So I tend to
So then you're bored.
And I'll say something, and I'm actually kind of annoyed at myself when I do it because I'm like, I didn't.
No, are you?
I am a little bit because I especially when I recognize I'm saying something I don't actually believe, I feel a little annoyed at that of myself.
You got to frame it. What would you say to someone who claimed?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll never claim it, but I'll throw it out there.
Yep.
But then I'll argue it.
Yeah. Sure.
In all fairness.
Yeah.
But I don't feel any guilt. I think to myself, I'm about to spice this shit up.
Right. And I have a ton of respect. The people that gain the most respect from me are the people who will acknowledge the strength of the other side's argument.
That's the only way to validate your own.
Yes. And so people who make it sound like they are infallible and the other side is moronically insane.
Yes.
Like that's not helpful.
That's not good. No.
And so I think maybe some of the times I'm wanting to do that.
That happens on both sides.
Everybody
both sides
does it.
Do it.
Both sides do it for sure.
Like I've just stopped using Democrat, Republican. Those don't mean anything. Those are bought and paid for things.
Sure.
I believe in liberal and conservatism.
Sure.
But you can be liberal in one way.
Yep.
And very conservative in another.
I heard a taxonomy that I thought was really helpful for thinking through political beliefs, and they talked about two ideas. How do you understand cultural change, and what do you think institutions' role in that is? So a hardcore traditionalist would say that the institution's job is to prevent all change from happening. Okay. The next level would say change is inevitable, but institutions maintain stability as society changes. That would be your more traditional conservative.
Sure.
The next level would say that institutions should propel change.
Should usher in.
That would be your typical progressive.
Yes.
Now, the farthest would be burn it all down for change. That's your revolutionary. The institutions themselves can't move. Institutions don't move fast enough for change.
Right.
So we need to burn it all down to bring change.
And yes.
And so that spectrum was pretty helpful for me. I probably fall on
That's very helpful for me.
Traditional conservative is probably where I tend to fall. Like change, certain kinds of change is inevitable. The fact that we carry cell phones now. I don't think we have to kill all technology. But there's
But are
certain
you resistant to it? Because
I am.
I just want it to slow down
Yep.
for a minute.
Sure.
Let me catch up.
Yeah, totally.
You know, and we as parents have to educate our kids and
Sure.
keep them up.
Yeah.
You know, and like we're homeschooling.
Yeah.
And so, like, you got to keep them there because you're usually learning from your peers at that age.
Yes.
In ways that are incalculable.
Which is that same thing translates to parenting, I think, because on the one hand, there's a certain level of change and things that are out there that are unhealthy and unhelpful. And on the other hand, you have to prepare your kid to be an adult that can navigate that world.
Absolutely.
So if you overprotect when they're 18, they don't know what to do with it.
They go nuts.
They go nuts. If you throw them to the wolves when they're 5 years old, it hurts them. So you have to do this dance between, hey, that's not good for you to be exposed to.
But honestly, if I'm going to choose one of those, I'm choosing the latter.
Yeah.
Because they'll learn.
Yeah, yeah, and that learning process is important.
You know, I was protected from a lot of things, and I had to find it out later.
Yep.
You know, versus saying, hey, man, you're going to get hurt. I'll tell you what's going to happen, but I'm not going to prevent you from making the mistake.
Yeah.
You need to make the mistake, especially with boys.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Boys and girls are very different in that.
Yep.
Boys need to know where the fence line is.
Yes.
You know,
Yep.
you're saying don't go past this grass. Why? What's past there? You know, and they're going to go
gonna
until
find
they
it.
hit the fence. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. And then they're going to try and figure out a way to get over the fence.
Of course.
Right?
Yep.
And
Jordan Peterson has a great what's the name of the chapter? It's something like let kids ride skateboards or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he basically makes the point like an appropriate level of danger is necessary for learning.
no, absolutely.
And
I agree.
You gotta let people take some chances growing up. And so, but I think that point of cultural change really, I think, informs a lot of the tension in culture right now, because when you look at most of human history, it seems to me like cultural changes would happen over hundreds of years.
Sure.
Which meant any two generations adjacent to each other had a lot in common. But now
Absolutely.
we can have the one of the examples I always point to show how fast culture changes. In 2008, Barack Obama is the progressive Democratic candidate, and when he's asked about same-sex marriage, he won't touch it.
Yeah.
It was untouchable.
I remember.
By 2015, it's the law of the land.
Right.
So something goes from untouchable by the progressive Democratic candidate to the law of the land in 7 years.
Right.
When culture's changing that fast, without even saying what's good or bad change, the reality is you have generations occupying the same space to each other that really lived in different worlds.
But that's also part of them ushering it in, like you were talking
Absolutely.
about earlier. It
Yep.
was sneaking it, lying about to gain
Sure.
a more moderate base to usher that in.
And this
'Cause they made it the law of the land.
this is my this is my millennial angst and complaint here. When the generation above me complains about how horrible millennials are, the snarky part of me wants to go like, you made us this way, right? Like, y'all raised us.
Right.
I mean, like, millennials didn't like pop up out of a field of just like dwarves grown from nothing.
You know what's so weird about the generational thing is you get labeled, but a generation encompasses like 20 years.
Yeah,
So, like, I know a lot of people who are, like, what year are you born?
I was born in '87.
So 6 years younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
So you're closer to my age than our parents' age.
Sure.
But, like my guitar player Johnny is right in between me and my dad.
Okay.
So he has a lot of the same cultural reference. Like
Yep.
he has a bigger zone with my dad than I do, but
Sure.
a bigger zone with me. And so it's really hard to define a generation,
Oh yeah, sure.
especially because things are moving so fast.
Right. Those categories they're helpful for demographics, but they rarely track onto real humans.
Exactly.
Because I think in some ways, like when I look at myself, if I read a description of Boomer, Gen X, and Millennial, on paper I'm a Millennial, but there's a lot of Gen X things that I'm like, I relate to that a lot more.
Right.
So I fit
I
somewhere.
identify as a boomer.
Yeah, I mean it's just
all the way down.
yes. So it works well at a very very broad level, but
You were talking about generations growing close together. Like my grandfather and my dad didn't have that different of an upbringing.
right. Yes.
Between my dad and me, I had a very different upbringing.
Yep.
Between me and my kids,
It's crazy.
It's unrecognizable as to
Yes.
how my father grew up.
Absolutely.
And that's the first time this has happened.
I remember the first time that we wanted to watch some sports something on TV, and we got home and it had already been going for 30 minutes, and Karis didn't understand why we couldn't start it back at the beginning of the game.
Right.
Because she had never experienced television that had a programming time. Because all she knew was streaming where you turn it on whenever you want.
But,
And I was
I mean-
like, I need to explain to her the whole idea of programming and that things start at a certain time. Like that's
But you also remember a pre-internet, probably.
yeah. Oh, I
society.
remember the Christmas where we got the AOL CD
Yep.
and plugged it in.
Would have been
and-
95.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yep. See, I remember the first like loading the first
Were you
website.
9?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, it'd have been 9.
I don't know if you remember the Buddy Holly music video.
Oh, yeah.
Weezer was
Yeah,
on
yeah,
that
yeah.
disc. It's
Yep.
the 30th anniversary of that album this year.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're doing a big tour. They just remastered the album.
That's fun.
I don't know. What's your feeling on the infinite level of album remaster releases?
I don't pay attention to it enough, and I have enough of a originalist bent in me that I tend to go, I was happy with the original.
Yeah.
So I don't tend to like pay much attention when they remaster stuff, but I also don't have a passionate thought on it. Where are you?
I'm a completionist.
Okay.
So it's like if they're putting something out,
I gotta have it.
it's canonical,
Yeah, sure.
right? Especially if they're all together still
Yep.
alive, like Megadeth, right? So if they put out a remaster, I'm like, okay, you're George Lucas, you want to do some
Sure.
things, and
That's
it's your
good.
property, right? But then, just as with George Lucas, you learn, hey, don't mess with it.
Yep, sure.
And so now I completely disregard them. The original, that's how it was.
Yep.
You put it out that way, you were proud of it then. Don't go back and mess with it. If you want to play it live differently,
Yep,
tweak it up,
of course.
do some live versions, but don't try and change history.
Who from people that were making music when you and I are growing up, who's making new stuff now that you like? Like I was listening to some new Metallica the other day, and I was like,
It's trash. You're talking about people in that era who are still making
yeah,
music.
still making new music. That you're like, dude, they still got it. They're
That
still
are
putting out good
still-
stuff.
Pearl Jam is the only one I would even bring to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting story, actually. So, huge Pearl Jam fan. Me
Yep.
and Josh played in many bands, covered a lot of Pearl Jam,
Yep.
played a lot of Pearl Jam. And then they kind of got sterile. They really plateaued, and everything started sounding the same. And then the George Bush administration happened, and they just showed their political cards so
Okay.
hard. And it really, like, you're doing this at a concert
Right.
when you don't know what the political, like, if you want to be political on Twitter or one thing, that's fine. But like when people are there paying to see you,
Sure.
leave it out.
Sure.
You know, and it just really, I kind of found that distasteful. And I feel like they haven't put out a good album. They've had some good songs, I felt like, but their latest album, Dark Matter, came out not too long ago, a few months ago.
Okay.
I listened to it a couple times. I just really didn't like it. And I was like, I kind of feel like I don't want to like it.
Yep.
Like, I just hate Eddie Vedder.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm going to listen to this and pretend like it's somebody else.
Uh-huh.
Or like it's one of my demos.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like, is this song good? And I really liked it.
Okay.
But I feel like I had to, like, consciously remove a bias.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
Yeah.
But it works.
Which leads to that like age-old dilemma of the artist and the art. Like, can you separate? How can't should do you go like, hey, whatever they're gonna say,
That
do
is,
whatever?
like you said, that is an age old because some people can't.
Yeah, sure.
It's like Mom. I'll use this example on Mom. Rocky Horror Picture Show, his favorite movie.
Yep.
All time. Susan Sarandon, Politics come out. Not
She was
watching
done.
that movie anymore. It's like, but you love the movie.
Yep.
It's kind of like I'm not going to stop watching Star Wars because of Mark Hamill being
Sure.
a nut job.
Sure.
Which he is. Like I'm not going to watch the sequels because I don't like them.
Sure.
But I'm still going to watch the old ones till the day I die.
Cassie, my wife, refuses to IMDb any actor or actress or look up anything about
Oh,
them.
yeah,
She's like, I don't want to know anything about their personal life. I just want to enjoy the movie, because as soon as if she starts going down learning about them, she always finds out something that disappoints her, and so she's like, I just want to live in this moment and just let the movie be the movie.
Yeah, but it's also it's the activists on both sides, the loudest mouths. You know, Hollywood has a bad reputation, but I think there's a lot of people over there who are scared to speak out.
Sure,
because they're outnumbered.
Right.
But you know, to me, 99% of every entertainment we've consumed has been written by Hollywood. And,
oh, sure.
You know, leftist-owned mediums.
Right.
You know, Christian music. James Gibson and I were talking about this not too long ago. The Christian rock or like Christian music scene. Well, it didn't even exist really.
Yeah.
In a major way until the '90s. I felt like.
Yeah. Well, at least to my awareness of it. Yeah.
But DC Talk, like,
they blew that up.
Not only did they change Christian music, but like they changed rock music. Like, they adapted and were putting out stuff at a equal to or better level than the contemporary artists.
I don't know if I've ever seen a group change their sound with the times
from start to finish
the way DC Talk did and stay good at what they were doing, which is pretty incredible. Okay, so here's where I'm ignorant. I don't know Christian rock groups today. Like it seemed like there was a golden era in the 90s. I'm going to start sounding like an old man now.
We are.
I don't know who's doing it today. I'm curious. I've lost track.
I couldn't tell you either, but what do you listen to now? Like, what's...
So I've honestly, again, I'm going to start sounding like an old man. I've been on a classic rock kick, and so
it's still around.
It's still around. So
it's still there.
There's like
it's not going anywhere.
So I honestly, there's a lot of ways that I hit like a threshold in guitar playing that I never got past, and I was just like the same guitar player for a long time.
Yeah.
So I've been going like, I want to go listen to great guitar players. And so I've been...
You trying to level up?
I'm trying to level up.
Really?
And so I've been listening to Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and trying to learn Jimmy Page and Hendrix stuff.
Page was sloppy.
He was sloppy, but he was passionate and good.
You knew what he was doing,
yep.
but it wasn't the execution. These guys today are almost too smooth. Flawlessly executed, but the soul's not in it.
Yep.
Like Page, even on the records, is kind of like flipping notes a little bit here and there, but it's like, I get it.
Yeah.
It's all it's thinking so fast.
Yes. So that's a world I've been spending a lot of time listening to that stuff lately, just trying to learn. I never, to a large extent, I thought more like a producer than a player.
Yeah.
And so I approached guitar from the place of filling up the space in the song.
You had that ear as a very young kid. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
You had a very good ear for production. And we communicated when you were pretty young about that stuff, because I was doing it. I was doing some production at the time.
You taught me everything I knew at the beginning. Like you took me and showed me your 4-track, and
I remember that.
You taught me all the basics of recording.
I remember that day.
Yep.
Yeah. That was cool.
So I never grew as a guitar player.
Really interested in it.
I was nerdy. I was a kid in a candy shop. It was a lot of fun.
That was cool.
So that's what I've been listening to a lot of lately.
Before you started playing guitar, even. I think.
Yeah. I was like maybe had just gotten a guitar, and was just starting to learn. So,
but you had a good space for the sound.
Yes.
Like you got a concept of the full sound, which a lot of people don't get. You know, it's like a drummer will think drum things, and it's not getting the full picture. But especially as somebody who's running a band or writing the songs, like you got to hear the whole thing. And
when I was playing a lot, like in college, the bands that were really big that we were imitating were people like Death Cab for Cutie, and who else would be in that category? Death Cab, Decemberists, some of that indie rock era. And a lot of what guitar players were doing then was not technically difficult.
No.
It was a lot of just arpeggios and filling out, it was creating a soundscape.
In the 90s.
Yeah, it did.
The 90s ruined the guitar.
Yes.
And 90s get some criticism.
Sure.
So does Kurt Cobain.
Yep.
And so Johnny and I have had this argument. So my guitar player can shred.
Yep.
The dude is amazing. But he's 10 years older than me.
Okay.
So like he's right in between, like I was telling you, he's right in between me and Dad.
Yep.
But so whereas I grew up listening to music in the 90s, he grew up listening to Van Halen.
Okay.
And Quiet Riot. Like all those guys who were just shredding.
Sure.
So I grew up playing Nirvana.
Yep.
And the reason I was telling him this, it's like Nirvana was great because you didn't have to be that good.
Right.
And he was like, that's why I hated it.
Which was really...
Because they're doing all these scales
Yes.
and riffs and all this stuff, learning the guitars in the 80s, and then us 90s kids are just like, dun,
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 dun.
It's really the punk rock vibe. It's the
was.
give the music back to the people. Like, we can't all be Jimmy Page.
It was, and you have revolutions in rock.
Yes.
Used to.
Yep.
Now music is so homogenous.
Right.
It's all just a blend of songwriter teams work for everybody, and it's like it's been completely globalized.
I heard Rick Beato use a line for a song that I was like, you pretty much just summarized all of music today. He said it's all vibe and no development. He said they just created a feel and let that feel ride for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And like it didn't go anywhere.
Right.
It didn't surprise you.
But that's the thing about Led Zeppelin that's still, and I'd put them above all other bands.
Yep.
Even the Beatles.
Yep.
Just because, like, the Beatles are, the songwriting complexity was insane.
Yep.
But the dynamic wasn't great. Like, it was kind of put you in a feeling.
Yep.
You know, I want to kiss you, girl, kind of a thing.
Sure.
Whereas Zeppelin took you places.
Oh man, and you
You're like,
you wouldn't know where it's coming.
You were like, hush right here.
Yeah.
And then boom.
Yep.
Like you're at war.
Yes.
It's like the dynamic shifts, and John Bonham is maybe not technically, you know, he's not going to be able to play for Tool.
Sure.
But the way he could intricately pull a
Oh.
song up,
Yeah.
that's a drummer's thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Walt's playing the drums right now. I'm like, you're the one who has the power to raise and lower the song,
Yep.
because playing soft and heavy on an acoustic guitar doesn't change it that much. It's your performance of it, but the drums they magnify it tenfold.
I heard Robert Plant in an interview one time. He was contrasting Zeppelin and the Beatles, and he said people come to see the Beatles play for the total package. Like, they want to see Paul. They want to see.
Right.
They said there's nothing to see with us.
Right.
You only come for the music.
Yeah.
That's all. That's you know, we aren't a performance piece as the band. It's just about the music, and I think there's something to that. Like, it was something special.
Well, that's a tough thing with the Beatles because they were the NSYNC of their day.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't put together by a corporation.
Sure.
They came together organically. They were the best songwriters of their time, but they look incredibly clean when you look back
Yeah.
on rock and roll.
Yeah.
When in reality, they were actually the ones that started
Yes.
that whole thing of the rock stars doing the drugs and
And
thinking
that-
outside the box. And
That the artist versus the art, there was no separating that with the Beatles. Like, who they were was always right alongside with the music they made. Like, they're you know, following their
Kind
story.
of, but, I mean, but the music is not necessarily reflective. Like, it wasn't political back then, you know.
No.
It was
No.
just the weirdness of what they were doing
Yep.
and the experimentation.
Yes.
But the fact that it still holds up today, like, I still think they've got 4 or 5 of the top 10 greatest albums
Absolutely.
of all time.
Yep. Absolutely. That the medley at the end of Abbey Road is still just one of my favorite musical moments I've ever listened to.
I honestly don't know what tops it.
It's so
like,
good.
name something better. What's even in the conversation there?
Man, I don't know.
I mean, if you're a Tommy fan, I think Tommy's got some good sequences, but not that good.
Mm-mm. It's outstanding.
You ever want to get a picture walking with family?
Yeah, I do. I really, really do.
That's kind of a bucket list thing.
Yeah.
I hate to travel though.
Yeah.
I
Oh
certainly
man.
don't want to go to Europe right now.
I went to England in college, so I've got the picture of just me. But I'd love to give it.
You do have
a
a picture.
I do. I'll have to find it. It's, you know,
Oh, that's cool.
it's somewhere. Now the thing that, like, I didn't realize is it's still a very active street,
Oh,
and so
yeah.
you know, you can't have the photographer
Yeah.
placed perfectly and get
Yeah.
everything. So it was like, run real fast.
You're like jumping over a car.
Yeah, and it's all blurred
on
because
Abbey
I'm
Road.
running really fast, and they're on the sidewalk trying to take the picture like that. So it's not quite as
That
iconic.
would be a funny website, just Abbey Road pictures.
Yeah, horrible
Post
Abbey
your
Road pictures.
Brother,
This is really
it
fun.
was awesome. I'm sure we'll see each other again.
Yes,
soon.
indeed.